such low voter turnout in the city of Houston. So we don't get to hear about anything else. We have a housing crisis right now. We have food insecurity and food deserts across the city of Houston. We have major transit issues that we could be talking about, but we don't. We talk about cops, potholes, and streets. It's cops and concrete and oil that run the city. If we want to break that, then we need people to start voting and getting involved in talking about those things. I don't think I've heard a reference to immigration once in this entire discussion. And to the extent that Democrats are talking about immigration, they seem to be moving to the right. In fact, I'm criticizing the Democratic Party, in their position, and far more out of step with the current Democratic Party. Probably, I hate to say this, but then Joe is this week. I mean, you had the president coming out for a wall. And you have Democrats running in rank and file. You've got the number 2 to Eric Adams up in New York saying close the border. And then you've got, major immigration critique going on in Chicago. In Houston, though, I don't even hear about it. Nobody talks about migration in the city of Houston. They're talking about cops, they're talking about potholes, and they're talking about streets. And you can go and look at every website. Don't listen to me. Go to ericmanning.us. Go to each individual candidate's website for the Houston city elections and look for yourself and see how many of them are talking about the issues I just mentioned versus the issues that Joe just mentioned. And you'll notice that's what they're all talking about. That's even the incumbents are talking about that. They talk about public safety and the cops and potholes and streets. Anyway, I'll get off it, but that's the mainstream line because developers and oil men and the police are big business in Houston.
All right, let's go ahead and run down your list real quickly on what you think the progressives need to know. Proposition A.
Yeah, so Prop A is going to allow any 3 city council members to bring an item to city council. Right now, the mayor can essentially shut down the agenda at any given time because it's a strong mayor system. 3 is a little bit low, to tell you the truth, for my taste, because I think that 3 out of 16 people sitting around the dais is not exactly a popular democracy, but it is just bringing it up for discussion. We are going to see some fringe things happen, like 3 people might say, abolish the health department. But at the same time, we have such a strong mayor system that nobody can make enough noise that they need to make. Or let me take that back. It's hard for people to make enough noise, as much noise as they need to make about issues that are popular issues for Houstonians. So I say vote in favor of Prop A. Don't let the good be the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Excellent. And Prop B?
Prop B is an easy call. We're part of this group called the Houston-Galveston Area Council. We have less votes than anybody else on the council. Houston and Harris County get less votes than the surrounding counties with smaller populations. This is very much a nonpartisan vote. We get less funding than we should for Houston and Harris County, even though we give more money into the pie, because we were volunteered as a county and as a city for this collective back in the 60s, and nobody's ever fixed it. So this amends the city charter to make sure that we get our fair share of money and services. So we get out what we put in. Vote in favor of Prop B. There's very few people who are against Prop B.
No, I think we represent like 60% of that consortium, right? And I think we only get like 20% of the money because what is it, a 5-county thing?
I think it's more. I think there's a bunch of counties and municipalities in there because it's cities and counties. So like you get all due respect to the people of Liberty County, and I think they should get their funding. And I think, frankly, Greg Abbott has left them out in the cold, and so has the federal government on some of their projects. But in terms of a collective with us, if we're putting in that much money, we got people in Houston. Like I said, we've got a massive eviction crisis and food deserts. That money should flow back.
Absolutely. We'll talk about candidates in a minute, but let's go ahead and bring Johnny into the conversation, and then we'll do that. Come on, Johnny.
Hey, Joe, where you going with your wife in your hand? Dun, 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 dun. I think Joe's wife is still calling him, and he's pretending he's got to get to work. So I think your guest is 100% on target, especially with his observation about newspapers. Every section of the newspaper, I would say more accurately, is not about labor. It's always about those with the bucks, the people at the very tippy top. Excellent observation. That's why I hate local newspapers. That's a crime, though, when you think about it. Yeah, and language is really revealing. When people say Democrat Party, that really irritates me. So there are like 16, 17, 18 Texas constitutional amendments in next month's election. And at least 4 or 5 of them are ridiculous, over the top. And I don't have my list in front of me, so I can't comment on them with any degree of accuracy, since I don't know where I put that list. But what was I calling now? Something to do with, oh, that's right. Joe said, Joe, in case you're listening, buddy, you know what projection is, right? When Republicans project onto Democrats and libs and progressives what they are guilty of doing and or being. There was plenty of irregularities in this past election, and every election really, but the irregularities were not being committed by the Democrats, unfortunately. They were being committed by the Republicans, like Brian, what's-his-face, in Georgia. You know, the one who's holding the governorship right now, unlawfully.
Yeah, Brian Kemp, yeah.
Brian Kemp, he used his office at that time as, was he the voter registrar or the secretary?
He was
of
actually
State?
the Secretary of State, and then at the same time he ran, because they ran the election, and at the same time he was running. So he ran the election in which he was in. Right. Amazing.
Major conflict of interest, Joe. Well, are you not thinking about that, or did you forget maybe? I don't know. But that's just one example of dozens of examples that Republicans engage in. The Democrats, they don't play hardball. The only time they play hardball is with their own people who run for office, who don't want to take corporate dark and PAC money. I've said this, I feel like a broken record, over and over and over again. Cenk Uygur, Nina Turner, and back in the day, Ralph Nader. That's when they play hardball instead of putting a check on the Republicans.
No, Johnny, I also want to remind Joe of one thing that I forgot to mention when Daniel was responding, and that is, when we talk about voter fraud, Dan Patrick, our lieutenant governor, put up $25 million asking folks to find voter fraud. And they did find voter fraud, but the person who found voter fraud was the lieutenant governor of Pennsylvania, Fetterman. Fetterman found voter fraud, I think, in 4 or 5 different instances. Each of the voter fraud was committed by Republicans trying to give extra votes to Donald Trump. But it gets a bit worse than that, because not only did that occur, but Patrick did not pay Fetterman the monies for finding the voter fraud. I don't know what excuse he used, but a third person came and found voter fraud themselves, and Patrick did have to pay that person for that voter fraud that he found. And what was it again? Voter fraud on the Republican side. I'm pretty sure that wasn't reported. It wasn't reported in the media that Joe's trusts. But what I'm happy about, Joe, is Joe, first of all, and this is a message directed to one of our listeners. Thank you for listening to Politics Done Right. I hope we develop the trust in you so that in the long run, you'd eventually stop listening to the people who are misleading you and making you unnecessarily angry at the wrong people. I guarantee if you stick with Politics Done Right and good guys like Johnny and Daniel Cohen, and remember, check out Daniel Cohen's newsletter. That's going to be given quite a bit of information. Anyway, Johnny, I got to go continue the show. Give me a one sentence, and please don't be like our brother Harry. One sentence to close out.
No, I won't do that. I wouldn't do that to you. I would simply say I also liked your guest's comments about barking up the wrong tree. Well, you just said that, barking up the wrong tree. We teach you the right tree to bark up, and keep in mind that when people vote, they're voting in good faith. People don't think about voting for someone else in place of someone else. It's just not worth it. Think about it. Unless you're a Republican, then you do it for free.
Thank you very much, John. You have a good day. All right. Now let's start going into some of the races. I noticed that talk about the districts that you ranked.
So to let everybody know out there, I only ranked I only talked about the districts where I'm voting, and I only really have a strong opinion about any district outside of that. Basically, one district that's outside of that, but we'll go through the voting list and see if we get to that. So I started with my own district, District J over here, West Side, Sharpstown, Gulfton, this area of town west of the Galleria. It's a very clear race. It's straight up or down. The current incumbent, Edward Pollard, goes to Republican clubs, calls himself an independent conservative. and has Mr. Pollard seems to run toward whatever is popular in the moment, and generally speaking, runs toward like a kind of what he would say is, moderate ideology. As a Democratic precinct chair, I'm supporting Ivan Sanchez, who's a Democrat in the race. And I think that Ivan is willing to listen on issues. There are some things that we might disagree on, but I can talk to him about it. And I think that he's done some good civic work in the past. He did walk the vote at University of Houston downtown, things like that, got a lot of people to turn out. And has done a lot of service work as well, cleaning up bayous, things like that. So some similarities, but some stark enough differences in that race. It makes a clear choice. But that's the only race actually that's a straight up and down like Democratic and Republican race actually, and pretty much in the whole ballot, or at least as close as it comes to that. I covered the at-large city council races. In at-large one, there's a couple of decent candidates, Leah Wolfdahl as well as Conchita Reyes. I lean toward Leah Wolfdahl. It also features Melanie Miles. If anybody wants to, my trouble with Melanie Miles is essentially she is what you want her to be, depending on which voter you are.
She was once a Republican, right?
She ran as Melanie Flowers for judge as a Republican, and now she's running as Melanie Miles for city council as a Democrat. And she actually has a good chance of winning the race, but I think it's this is the kind of thing that people should really pay attention to. Because she basically is out there saying that she voted in the Republican primary as late as 2018. She switched over by 2020. But the thing is, if you were horrified by the Trump administration and Trump rhetoric, there really was nothing that you needed to see from the time he ran starting in 2015 to the end of 2018. Like, that was enough information that if you were turned off by that ideology, then you would have switched far before that. So I think it's an opportunistic switch. I think that we need people in office who are at least going to shoot straight with us on most of the issues. I think, to say that politicians are not generally opportunists, okay, that's fair. But it's a pretty egregious example of opportunism when you claim that you just can't, be with the Trumps anymore, when really the county changed, and she knows that it's harder for her to get elected if she's like a Trump Republican than if she's someone who says that she switched parties. So I think she switched parties for political opportunism, and I think that that's worth noting. And I would urge people to look at other candidates for at-large one, like Leah Wolfdahl, who has a long record of activism and organizing. And like I said before, I give Conchita credit, especially for democracy issues. As well, but I lean toward Leah Wolfdahl for at-large.
No, I saw all three of them speak, and what I liked about Leah is Leah apparently did the grassroots work with the organizations that she worked on, and Conchita, I also saw Conchita at an organization. I wasn't sure what is Conchita's claim to fame.
Well, I think she's done some community work and volunteering around as well. I think she had been in Spring for a while, and I think she'd been doing work out there. The Chronicle ran a piece actually that, where they went over everybody's residence, and that was one of the ones that they kind of questioned. But to tell you the truth, when I read that piece, all it did was reinforce to me, this is just my opinion, I didn't buy the argument that she was outside of the city. I think that she's been inside the city. Maybe it's been 2 or 3 years as opposed to, 30 years or something like that in terms of her in the city residence. But I bought her explanation, and there were 6 or 7 others that I didn't. But I did buy her explanation. So I think it's been a little bit more under the radar, and I think it's been Houston area as opposed to at 100% inside of city of Houston. But from where I'm sitting, for what it's worth, I'm fine with that. That's okay, as far as I'm concerned. You'll notice that Leah and Conchita both have quite a few of endorsements from former and sitting politicians and things like that. So I don't think it's a matter of, but I don't think it's a matter of anybody being propped up in this case. I think it's a matter of, there are people they've done community work in the past. Leah's just had more, I think, official positions in that capacity. Okay. And like I said, I support her. I mean, I'm, to be very clear, that's who I'm voting for in the race.
Yeah. But now at large too.
I'm going with Obst Nwabara because Obst is the only candidate in the race who has shown up consistently for grassroots causes and specifically grassroots democracy causes. And he's been doing that now for several years. He ran for Harris County Department of Education on a precinct chair election, didn't win. Made it to the runoff out of 3 amongst the precinct chairs, didn't win the race. But he is a dependable sort of Sanders progressive city council candidate, which is rare. We don't have a whole lot of them. There are several other candidates in that race. They are all fighting over a piece of sort of establishment pie, if you'll call it that, from different angles. You'll see that. So Holly Flynn Villaseca, Nick Hellier, and a few other people who are in that race as well.
What's Obst's chances?
It's hard to say. So let me back up and say, first of all, I don't predict elections in general anymore because who the heck knows? It's turned into a cottage industry. And it's even harder when it comes to a city of Houston election because it's not like there's polling for at-large 2 in the city of Houston. But I would say, look, he's running against well-funded people who are backed up by large machines. So it's hard to, right? That's a hard race. I would say that on paper, he's got an uphill fight, but he knew that from the beginning, and he's run a respectable race, and he's raised some decent money, not the kinds of 6-figure sums that the people he's running against have raised, but some 5-figure quarters and things like that. So we'll see. I mean, sometimes these people surprise.
At large 3.
At large 3, I lean toward Donnell Cooper and Richard Cantu. I do want to give a quick shout out actually to Ethan Michelle Gans, first non-binary candidate in the city of Houston. But beyond that, an actual lefty who challenges the system in general and takes positions that challenge the system. So if somebody, given the number of people who are in that race, it's going to go to a runoff. If somebody wanted to vote for Ethan in the first round, I would support that just to elevate some of those issues, like really questioning where some of our police budget is going, which is completely in the shadows. It's not transparent at all. But I lean toward Donnell or Richard. Donnell challenged the sort of Houston Police Officers Union a little bit in terms of where their ideology is, and did a good job of pointing out how the police unions are not in complete agreement with one another, that the African American Police Officers Union and the Houston Police Officers Union actually don't see entirely eye to eye on things. And I respected the fact that he brought some of that critique to the table. Richard Cantu has done a good job on the Harris County Department of Education in general. That department has always been under threat of anti-education partisans. When it's actually great, it's a great department. It brings critical programs to the city. It does good work. It's very pro-social. It's a very good. It's probably the most functioning body of government, maybe in the whole state of Texas. So he's done a good job there. There's some things I disagree with him on. He wants to heavily increase the police presence in schools, and the data has not borne out on that. But in general, I think that Donnell and Richard are reasonable choices. And like I said, I think I have a lot of respect for Ethan as well.
So in effect, you're waiting for the runoff to see what you really got to do.
Well, it's a harder decision because both of them have pros and cons, right? When it comes to from where I'm sitting, from what I care about.
I got you. At large 4.
At large 4 is Letitia Plummer, walking away easy. It's arguable that there's a one-person progressive bloc in city council, and it's Letitia Plummer. But even let's not even talk ideologically speaking. Letitia looks at the data. She voted for ShotSpotter. She looked at it. It came in. People say, you voted for it before you voted against it about issues with politicians all the time. But sometimes you get something that comes in. We knew ShotSpotter was going to be a bad idea from the beginning, but I understand why politicians who have, 50 different issues coming at them at any given time might not know one way or the other. So if somebody looks at the data and says, well, this isn't what I thought it was going to be, and decides to tilt against something or in favor of something based on what the results of the actual policy are, I respect that. But beyond that, she's the only one who's challenged the police budgets. She's the only one that stood with the firefighters over arbitration. She's the only person who's actually fought on housing issues really heavily. And she's fought for this apartment inspection program over the last few years. And
recently, Time out. Recently, it seems like she got into a little TC with the mayor with regards to the funding, I believe, for the moving those people that live in Cancer Alley. I think in uh, what was that all about?
So I don't know, I want to speak, I'm not informed specifically on the scuffle between Councilmember Plummer and the mayor on that. But what I will say is the people in the cancer cluster are not, when the mayor says we need to pay for them to move, not everybody wants to move. There were a
Right.
lot of people making the case that it actually can be environmentally cleaned up and that it could be of reasonable price to do, but it would take public money. And the city at the end of the day decided that they didn't want to go that route. So not everybody is in agreement over there. I think the sickest and saddest thing about that, and I'm so glad you brought it up, is just Union Pacific is getting away with hurting people. It's getting away with causing cancer to people. It's getting away with causing people, I have a friend that lives over there, or lived over there. She's moved away since, but half her body sometimes will go into paralysis. She lost her parents long before she should have lost them. And it's horrible. It's a horrific environmental racism that took place over there. And I mean, that's the right word for it. There were 3 historic Houston Black communities where this took place. And Union Pacific, meanwhile, is funding campaigns of locals. Whenever they get criticized, it's over things like stopped trains, not creosote in the soil. And it's sick, when they throw these galas and they talk about how they're funding 30 nonprofits in the city of Houston, and all these different city councilors and local politicians show up to stand with Union Pacific because they're doing such good for the community. I mean, that is just straight up astroturfing propaganda. Period. The end.
When we talk about not only corporate greed, but corporations getting away with things, and people talk about why are progressives anti-corporations, which we're not. We're anti-bad corporations. This is a good example. When we talk about socializing the profits and rather not socializing the debt and what's the phrase?
Privatize the gains and socialize the losses. Yeah.
Now this is a classic example. These guys completely polluted the environment, and we're talking about public sector cleaning it up. I'm very, very sorry. That is something that the company should have been responsible for cleaning up. You make the mess, you clean it up, you cause harm to people, you pay for that harm as best you can. Okay, at large 5, I notice you abstain, and we're going to have to kind of speed up a bit. So I'm going to leave your abstention and go to controller.
Yeah, I'm going with Chris Hollins. I think Shannon Nobles, has a lot of extensive experience in the position, but there's a lot about the status quo I don't like to see at City Hall. People point out that Hollins doesn't have as much experience as she does, and that's correct. But he does have experience managing finances, and the other thing is he didn't have any experience as clerk, and he was a great clerk. He was an awesome clerk. He was the best clerk we probably ever had in the city in the history.
And the best one we had to have during a pandemic, because he sure allowed people to have ingenious ways of voting, right?
He did, and there were a lot of people who brought a politician's job, an elected employee's job is not to be like people talk about CEOs being innovators. Their job is not to be an innovator. Their job is to find the best ideas and implement the best ideas. So when someone like Ben Chow says, we need to do drive-through voting, it's Chris Holland's job as the clerk to say, yes, we do, and then make sure that idea gets implemented. They both did their job. And that's true of every idea that was brought to the table. 24-hour voting was a great idea. Extended voting hours is a great idea. We had great turnout. We had a smooth election during a pandemic. So, I mean, despite the claims of propagandists, that was an excellently run election. They did take more funding to do it, but they were smart enough to have the foresight that it was going to take more funding to do that during a pandemic, and he got the job done. I'm very impressed with what he did. I'll say this in the same breath. Orlando Sanchez is a disaster. He's always been a disaster. He's always been a flunky. He's always been a corporate-owned lobbyist flunky. Dave Martin is a Republican and is probably the biggest indictment on the entire career of Sylvester Turner, that Dave Martin was made the mayoral pro tem under Turner, and that Turner is now and David Robinson are now supporting Dave Martin for controller. I think it's a tragedy. I think that they deserve lots of critique for that, and I wanted to make sure to state that before we got off the controller's race.
All right, last one. Sheila Jackson Lee for mayor.
Well, John Whitmire is a disaster, and there's things about Sheila I agree with, and things about Sheila that I disagree with. But what I do know is the biggest threat to the city of Houston's sovereignty right now, and the Harris County sovereignty, is coming from the state of Texas. And we deserve the right to self-rule and home rule and self-determination, and we don't need people coming in and telling us where we can draw our lines. Sheila Jackson Lee is going to be the best bulwark against that. Period. The end.
I mean, that sounds like it. Okay, folks, 713-526-5738. We don't have much time, but if you want to give us a call, 713-526-5738. Now, when I saw this stuff, I said, you know what, I need to get you to come on here because a few days ago, a caller said, hey, there's this big election happening in Houston. You guys are our local station, and you hadn't covered the particular election. To which I said to the listener, you know what, man? You're absolutely right. And when you wrote this paper, I said, let me go ahead and get Daniel in here to talk a whole lot about this. Folks, give us a call, 713-526-5738, extension number 2. You'll get on air right away. Jack will talk to you and put you on right away. 713-526-5738, extension number 2. I await your calls. We have a few minutes that we can take the calls. Una vez más, 713-526-5738, extension number 2. I'm glad that you're able to cover this, Daniel. I mean, I think that the election, while very few people are hearing about it, very few people are going to vote, there's one person that's on air almost 24/7, and that is Whitmire. He has a whole lot of money in the bank. And do you think I am of the I don't think television commercials work as they did in the past. I think there's a lot more underground that occurs. I think the reason why you see Donald Trump overperforming in the polls right now has very little to do with what's on air, but everything to do that with the Republican Party nurturing their own form of media, nurturing their own clubs and institutions, things that the Democratic Party has refused to do as they put all their money into high-priced consultants. Your thoughts?
I think that the TV is important because of the crime way or the crime narrative. Skews is impactful with older voters. But I think everything you said is correct. I think that there is a huge movement, that people are overlooking. People don't understand these Twitch streamers are moving thousands and millions of people
exactly.
at a time.
And
they're not paying attention to that.
That's what, and who sees that are the Republican folks are using all these avenues, investing money in it, but we don't have the Democratic Party doing that. Come on in, Tag.
Yeah, good morning, Egberto. How you doing?
I'm doing fine. Tag, talk to me, my brother.
Yeah, I just think that, when we're talking about elections and the way some people do their governance,
Mm-hmm.
we don't need to look any further than what's going on in Israel right now with the right-wing nationalists and what happens when that gets played out too far and they start trying to neuter the Supreme Court, for example. You have people revolt. So I think that we need to be very careful about having right-wing nationalists leading our country. So that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, my brother. Tag, give me your thoughts on that to close out for me, Daniel.
Tag's right. Bibi Netanyahu is a monster. It's very clear. You can say that in the same breath and still even criticize Hamas for everything that's happened and condemn that. But yeah, of course, the right-wing nationalists in Israel have caused all kinds of massive chaos and violence, and of course they will here too.
I stayed away from the Israel subject as best I could on my show yesterday because, again, it is very touchy. But I'm glad you came on and said exactly what you said. You can come out and say what Netanyahu has been doing is criminal, and what Hamas has done has been horrendous. We don't need innocent people dead on either side of the border, and you have people living in the turmoil that they're living in the West Bank and Gaza. That presents a problem. That has nothing to do with Jewishness or any of that sorts. Your thoughts?
I completely agree. We didn't mention, I do want to give one quick shout out. Travis McGee for District D is one of the most active advocates in the city of Houston. He single-handedly, well, not quite single-handedly, but with very few people, beat back a dump in his community twice. And there is now a community center there where they thought they were going to put a dump. He's one of the most active people in HISD advocacy. And I just wanted to make sure to get that in there. Travis McGee for District D may very well be the best person on the ballot this year.
Thank you for bringing that up. Of course, that is above my pay grade. I mean, you can't know all these people that are running, but again, that's why we have a lot of good folks like you with newsletters and all of that to keep us informed with what's going on. But anyhow, let me go and throw this to our geniuses in the studio. Howard, come on in.
Alrighty then, another fine show there, Egberto. Good luck on all the candidates who are going to run for mayor. It's going to be quite an interesting race. And that's about all I got. Jack, what's your wisdom today?
Well, first off, the election's coming up. Educate yourself on the issues. Get registered. Check your registration, because some people may get bumped off the roll. So check your registration and show up and vote.
Today's the last day to register, as I recall. Right, listen to Howard. Vote, vote, vote. Daniel, thank you so kindly for being with us. Give me a 10-second closer.
Yeah, if you get involved, make sure that you vote, make sure that you take action. And if you don't know how, then check us out at indivisiblehouston.com. That's indivisible, like one nation, indivisible, Houston, like this wonderful city we live in.com.
And give us your newsletter. I want people to sign up for your newsletter.
Yes, thank you. DanielJCohen.substack.com. That's Disruption and Democracy with Daniel J. Cohen. DanielJCohen.substack.com.
I want everybody to be informed, folks. My name is Egberto Willis. I want to thank Howard, Jack, and Daniel, and our callers. My name is Egberto Willis. This is Politics Unread, and you guys know how I end this, baby. I am what? Out.